In the recent past, I've made a couple tower fantasy videos, including a top 10 things I wish I knew. Today, I'm going to talk about the top 10 tips that I would give a new player, separate, maybe a couple things will be similar, to the top 10 things I wish I knew, so that you can make as little mistakes as possible going into this game if you're trying it out for the first time. The first tip is to pick an element early. Now, what do I mean by that? If you go into your weapons here, which you'll discover as you play the game, you'll see every weapon has an element. This is physical, this is altered, this is ice, this is fire, and this is bolt. Every one of these is generally designed to be used together, though you can use kind of like a trifecta of elements because you can use 3 weapons. But as a general, I think, mainstream, average, free-to-play player, you're only really going to be able to afford to be really good at one singular element. So pick this early before you start spending a lot, because you will be focusing one, especially in the short term and maybe even midterm, unless you start spending a lot of money in this game. So that's my tip number 1. Tip number 2 is kind of a continuation of that first one, is when picking an element, personally, I would suggest you highly consider altered. There's a couple characters that are altered. Even this one right here is altered. It can just actually change elements a little bit, but some of them are just pure altered. And here's why I would suggest altered. These release very rarely compared to other elements, and there is a power creep in this game where the new characters are better than the old characters. And altered can access most forms of content. It's not super weak to anything. In endgame progression-based content, altered is somewhat debuffed. It does like 75% of the damage that it should, yet you can access all 4 elements endgame content because some of it is kind of split by element. Altered can do them all, so if you have to pick one to focus on, then just maybe this is the one to get. You won't get these without investing your important premium currencies, so if you had to pick one to spend these on, personally, I would suggest altered. If I had the information I had now and I was starting the game again, I would probably go very heavily into altered. It would actually not be that tough and very cheap if I wanted to spend real money to get into it, because every new player can spend $10 via a special event that lasts a month and get a free altered character. Altered will just have a lot of possibilities for you, and you can only really get into it as like a main element if you go in using your currency wisely or you spend a lot of money after the fact. So that's why, very important, number 2, I would really consider altered over other elements. Maybe do research into the elements, because I think this is probably the best idea for the average new player playing this game. Number 3 is going to be, oh my gosh. All right, scrolling on the menu zooms me in. That's right. I forgot that it goes through menus. Number 3 is going to be to conserve the premium currency you earned via gameplay. And so looking kind of like at the shop or at the gacha, because this is a gacha game, the dark crystals are something you'll earn a lot of at the beginning of the game if you go through Asperia, but also just through your normal progression. But it does slow down tremendously as you catch up to the current content, and the rate at which you get that, plus the red nuclei and special vouchers that you need to get good characters, such as these altered characters. This is one I was showing you earlier, such as these altered characters. Here's another one that I have. Or any new characters that kind of win the power creep in general, you're going to need these currencies. They are not that accessible to get, other than the first time you go through content. The amount that you get these resources is very limited, so conserve it. Don't waste it. Wait until you know what you want to spend it on. Even if what you want to spend it on is a bunch of swimsuits that have absolutely nothing to do with progression. That is totally something that you can do. Go right ahead. And so this next one, number 4, is also kind of related. I'm on like a little train here. Number 4 is to use guides and wikis to plan your gameplay for time and or money efficiency. If you don't care too much about the story, anyway. You will make mistakes, or you'll find yourself running out of viable content to play in this game quickly if you don't plan ahead. The game wants to glue you to the end game and get you logging in for 10 minutes a day, every day for the rest of your life. It doesn't want to give you a fulfilling playthrough. All the other content is kind of just there to keep you busy until the next update, where they can then glue you to a new endgame loop for the next 6 weeks before the cycle repeats again. For example, you start on Asperia, and you can get a lot of dark crystals here, but the game will very quickly skip you to Vera after you do the tutorial. This will kind of break your story immersion, but there's a lot of good currencies here that are not dark crystals that you can get as well, including access to some of your first time-gated content as well. Domain 9 is extremely time-gated, and so getting to this as early as possible is very useful, also because you get a companion that deals damage that you can unlock by doing this as soon as possible, which can also help you steamroll other content in the game. And then Network is right now where the game's currently up to, and this is where the events go to whenever they release a new one, and you kind of need to have access to that. And so if you go into Terminal, once you get through that tutorial, that time skip, and you reach your apartment on Vera, if you keep going with the time skip, you can actually skip ahead to Domain 9 or to Network if you want in advance, if you don't care about your story progression, and get access to these very useful things before you actually properly go through things linearly. Number 5 is, I suggest using an interactive map website. Just look up Tower Fantasy Interactive Map. There's a couple of them. To assist your 100% map completion, like 100% completion of zones in the game. This is how you get a lot of the special currencies that you're going to need to progress in the game, or to get your cosmetics without dishing out hundreds or thousands of dollars. I'm not exaggerating. So you'll want to do these, and you want to do these well. So I suggest looking at these interactive maps early so you can get marking all the things you found. It's a bit of an annoying thing, but until you reach Domain 9, most things are just not marked on the map properly. So Asperia and Vera especially. By Network, I haven't actually really explored Network, but I hear it can all be marked on the map pretty early on. You could kind of get the same thing going on here in Domain 9. It just requires some separate progression first. But for especially the first 2 areas, and maybe even some of Domain 9, I've been using it. Interactive map, very useful. Much less headache, because sometimes even things are not marked very well. The most noteworthy example, I think, is if you're exploring Banshees, you'll unlock the map via these towers, very Far Cry style. There's something you can claim in these hills that unlocks via this tower up here for Navia, but it counts for Banshee's 100% completion. But you would never see that because it's off the map. You would never think to go there. It's in Navia, but it counts for Banshee's. This is where having that map just comes really in handy. So, interactive map, heavily suggested. Do it. Number 6, I suggest following the story skip after the tutorial, definitely at least a little bit, because when you go far enough, you'll unlock this button, which shows you the Wanderer's Log, which gives you some rewards for completing certain activities as a one-off, gets you some pretty nice stuff, as well as this button, which unlocks your weeklies and your dailies that you're going to want to complete. If you don't want to follow the story skip, then I suggest making use of a trick that I found out when I was new, which was go to any of your materials for upgrading and etc. your weapons, and look for things like this: interstellar exploration, dimensional trials. Click on it and it'll bring you to this menu even if you're not already supposed to be on this menu. This is very useful. I use this because I didn't want to follow the story skip, so this is how I would suggest you do it if you don't actually go with the story skip. Number 7, and this kind of ties into something that I've already talked about. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. If you can handle further story skipping, then I would actually heavily suggest skipping ahead. Like, I'm not just saying you can do it, I'm recommending you skip ahead if it doesn't ruin your enjoyment of the game. Because again, in Network right now, or eventually in the future, some other location, you're going to be able to access the recent events, which with the access to that, you'll get really good rewards. You get to pad out your game time with these highly rewarding, repetitive activities that are changing constantly every 6 weeks. And you'll be able to reach places like Domain 9, where content is very time-gated, and you have access to things that increase your power level, I'd say a decent bit, like those companions that follow you around, or whatever else comes next. I'm sure there will be even more after this. I would heavily suggest jumping ahead to get access to these different things before actually plunging through all of it. If you're worried about missing out on the story, I understand. You don't have to do this. I just suggest it, especially as someone that's gone through all of this story, all of this story, and all of this story, just not this one yet. The story makes no fucking sense. It's not going to start making sense. It's not going to get really much better at any point. I'll tell you that up front. So if you're worried about missing out on a really good story and you think you're going to be confused, don't, because I played through all of it and I can tell you I am just as confused now as I was when the time skip brought me from Asperia to Vera after the tutorial. Playing through the story did not help me at all. It is still super fucking confusing. The rewards matter the most. Number 8, I heavily suggest joining a crew as soon as possible. This is like a guild, but it's not like an MMORPG guild. Instead, this is just like a limited organization that you join where you do weeklies and dailies of like handing in materials, accomplishing certain tasks, and then you get access to another currency that allows you to buy certain things, some of which being very handy, and you get weekly rewards, etc. every week. More depending on if you're in a level 6 crew. I'm actually in a crew that has like some level 5 rewards, so I'm not even doing it optimally. But you get access to those premium currencies especially, as well as other useful things to help in your progression. Join a crew ASAP. You don't have to know any of them. You don't have to like any of them. They don't even seem to really interact at all. It is just a collection of players that mutually exploit each other for selfish benefits, and you need to be in one as soon as possible if you care about progression or getting free currency to unlock cosmetics. Speaking of joining a crew, number 9 is to be social. Be social. Seek out mentors in the world chat, the mentor chat, wherever. You get rewards. You can have up to 3 mentors. You can seek carries for some of this daily end game, etc. content like raids and etc. You could seek out carries for this. A lot of players, in my experience, will be happy to carry you through this. And you get really good rewards that otherwise would not be available to you unless you find a group that you can run them with reliably, or start getting involved in, I don't know, something recurring, something reliable, or you get really, really powerful in endgame to be able to solo any of this stuff. So be social, or you're going to miss out on a lot of rewards over the many weeks, that it's going to take you to catch up to where everybody else is. It'll take months. Hell, it could take a year if you're free to play to actually catch up to where everybody else is, depending what you consider to be catching up. And finally, my number 10 tip, and my god, I really just wish I knew this at the beginning of the game, so I'm going to repeat this for my top 10 things that I wish I knew. My number 10 tip is, for the love of God, hold left control while moving to walk. This will be so handy when you're going through the story and the characters you're with are going to be walking and you don't want to follow them by just tapping W constantly. Hold left control to walk. I've been talking to a bunch of players that have been playing this game for years since release, and they don't know that you can do this. So this tip, important, do it. And finally, that's it. That's all 10 tips. So I hope this has been helpful to you. There's a playlist in the description below where I've made a couple other videos on this game. I might make a couple more to come, just things to help out new players that are going through what I just went through. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If I can't help you, maybe somebody else can. For now though, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.